We're good. Katrina, was that a yes?
Yeah, oh, yes, yes.
Then I will open the meeting. First item on the agenda is Mr. Collin, which, sorry I pronounced that wrong. I will waive the formal reading of the public notices as posted in the Sentinel. I assume everyone is familiar with the property. All right, then if you'd like to come up and take a seat. One question right off the bat, because we have the history of the rehearing and I have contradictory numbers. Are you asking for 12 horses or 6 horses?
I was originally asking for 12 with the commercial boarding, but that's gone by the wayside. And I picked a number that I thought was somewhat more reasonable. And I think Dustin, you had mentioned on the first night there, if it was somewhere near 5 or 6, that might make more sense. So I just picked 6, but whatever we can do, I think.
For what it's worth to the board, by all means, David, jump in and tell me I'm wrong. We can grant anything below the request. So maybe we decide 3 or 7, whatever.
Okay.
So with that, you were here, what, 2 months ago?
Maybe, yeah, something like that.
So I understand the big difference is the manure plan, but would you give us a general overview and then whatever else if questions this.
Yeah, just generally speaking, the 2 biggest things would be the number of animals, making it a commercial boarding operation, taking that off the table and just more as a residential house with somebody who might have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 horses, something like that as a pet. And then I think it was just mentioned at the last hearing that it might be helpful to see more of a substantial manure management plan. So I put together that on the collection and storage and then application or disposal of the manure. So I think I went in depth on that, but if there are any questions on that, I definitely can answer.
Not a question for you, Katrina. I did not see the manure management plan in the packet. You did get that? Because did everyone else see that? It came by email.
I did get it via email.
So the emails in your.
Josh, can I apologize? I didn't mean horse apples figuratively, give the first one. I meant it is. Sometimes when people come before the board, it's not our job to crush trees, but it's to say that there's possibly an alternative or something to think about. And I'm sorry that, I maybe touched a nerve with something that you do have a tremendous amount of expertise in. And I came across in your email with your strategic plan. But I apologize for it because I feel like I kind of got us off time.
I appreciate that. Did you have any comments on the manure plan? Does that seem reasonable?
It's way better than half this community does. They use roll-off dumpsters.
Okay.
All right.
It's outside of my expertise, but it looked reasonable to me.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure everyone had seen it in the email because I wasn't seeing a hard copy here,
Okay. Yeah.
which isn't your fault.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
If everyone saw it in the email, then we're all good.
I tried to give like a representation of density too with the pack, with the straw, just to give you like an idea of volume if you didn't have horses, just what that would look like stacked up if I had an absentee owner and like they just stacked everything for the whole 3 months there, like what that would look like. It wouldn't fill up the whole yard, but it would be something to deal with. So maybe that might help out.
I think I heard you say no plans for a business there.
That's correct.
It could be private residents and their horses.
That's right.
So to just ask a little bit further on that, is it planned to be your residence and usage, or are you planning to rent the residence and the horse storage?
We're not going to live there. So it'd probably be some sort of lease or rental agreement, something like that.
Okay.
Potentially a rent to own, or so I'm not sure exactly yet.
And just so you're aware, you probably are, but if it is to be a business, you've got to get a special use permit for the private.
Yes. Yep.
If you don't get approval, you decide to not, you're at 0 horses, do you have any particular plans in that case?
I don't right now. I'm hoping that doesn't happen. Yeah, not at the moment.
And if I understand right, you don't have a current planned tenant, so if we were to say request is 6, we say 3 or 4 or whatever.
Mhm.
It isn't like you've got literally horses on the field waiting to come
Yeah, that's right. I have one interested party who has 5 horses. They're one of the trainers over at the Equa Center. I've been talking to him a little bit, on and off. But that, and maybe a couple other people have contacted me with a few horses kind of thing, but nothing in my, if you said 6, it might be somebody with 2 horses there, and it was all kind of a moot task, but I've kind of had that range in there. It's 5 and under, I've sort of had requests about.
which is probably a good detour to bring up. We have a email we received from a Joanna Dykton,
Yeah, Deisher.
from Lollipop Farm, which talks about acreage for horses and also points out that horses are herd animals, so 1 is probably a bad number to grant a variance for.
Want a copy of it?
Just wanted to reference that for the.
Yeah, it was just kind of in the idea of reaching out to experts in the field, both within the community and outside of it. Unfortunately, I learned that most people aren't willing to stand behind their opinion on things. And when it comes to putting their name on a paper, you need to get to somebody who's official.
Yep.
Before it's something there. So yeah, she's the head of the farm program. Mainly, she deals with horses and horse placement at Lollipop. I contacted her just as far as like, is there a general list of guidelines you look for if you're placing a horse, you know, as far as acreage, access to water, you know, waste management, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, she kind of laid it out that it really just boils down to you got to have at least 1.5 acres to 2. And within this community, especially on that lot, you're going to need to supplement it with hay, grain, you know, those pastures, or that 1.5 to 2 acres is going to need to be split to 2 pastures so you can rotate it. But that's something that you're really going to have to explore, because the other thing that you can type it into Google is horses won't graze on more than 15-degree slope. And unfortunately, half that front pasture is kind of more than 15 degrees. You've got probably like 30 foot by about 60 foot in that front pasture that they might get down to. But I mean, acres, 208 by 208 feet, you know.
Mhm.
So that's just kind of, that's what they're looking for. Unofficially, Sheriff Stable, they were happy to see other people trying to do something with horses around the park again.
Yeah.
Their suggestion was actually that it was used as a day-night riding stable sort of thing, like you would just day-night board horses, because there are tourists who come to ride horses in the park, and they're going to trail around from Ontario or wherever.
Yeah.
And they were like, you know, that might be a more efficient use of it, because then you're playing with the seasonality of it. You can use that pasture land across the street efficiently. And when it comes down to that barn itself, you're just using it for loading, unloading. But
Like a
that's
VRBO for horses.
kind of, yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting idea. I don't know that I might run into numbers there, you know, like just not being able to put a certain amount in, but that's a cool idea.
I think what we come up with today is just going to be limited to permanent horses.
Yep.
You know, like that kind of concept.
Sure, yeah, regardless of who's there, but yeah,
Just on that lot, that tax.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay, understood.
Does nothing for the lot across the street or
That's right.
their acreage scale
Yeah.
around.
I understand that. Yeah, I mean, my only comment would be, like you said, Dustin, there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions, and probably gonna be a little conservative on what they put down. Certainly supplementing feed is a normal practice that happens all over the place, and I think we could find a lot of instances around Mendon here with people on, you know, less than 1 to 2 acres per horse kind of thing.
Yeah.
Lollipop Farm themselves, I don't even think they have a pasture over 1 or 2 acres.
You know,
They have a half acre and a third of an acre, and they have 2 or 3 horses on them, and so.
I didn't get the email response, but I was also in contact with the chief officer of the Humane Society of Rochester.
Yep.
And he confirmed to me the same approximate numbers of 1.5 to 2 per
Yep.
horse.
Yep.
And that horses are pack animals. You can't really just do
One. Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah, so that would be if you're if you're just no supplementation, that's a horse grazing 12 months a year off the land, right?
No, that would be according to their conversations, it's not included in the email, I could have them included again, but then it would be closer to 4 acres they want per horse. If it's straight grassland grazing. And that's with rotational schedule, but like, if you're gonna supplement it with hay, with grain, then yeah, that's the 1.5 to 2 per. If you lived in Rush, yeah, and you got a 20-foot by 20-foot backyard, you can have 10.
Right.
You know, that's the way that their code's read, you know.
Yeah. Okay, understood.
Anyone have any additional questions? All right, open comment. Anyone online, Katrina? Nope. All right. I will waive the formal asking of the 5 questions. I think we'll cover that adequately. Gonna ask a question of legal counsel. Could we delay the closing of the public hearing until later in the meeting? Because I would not be surprised, considering it's a rehearing, if we end up realizing we have more questions as we discuss things, or is that a complete bad process?
You can keep the public, well, you need to close the public hearing in order to move on to,
Okay.
well, I think that you can, well, it's lobby, you can see my struggle.
Yeah. I know it's not ideal.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
just, this is not the first time we've had this applicant before.
You can, I'll say this, why don't you table the public hearing so to later in the meeting? 'Cause tabling, technically tabling the action allows you to attend to other matters of the meeting, and come back to it. And since there's nobody else here.
Yeah.
I don't see there's a huge problem with that.
I was just trying to maximize flexibility for us as a board. So with that, no other questions, a motion to table the public hearing till later.
Table the public hearing until later.
All right. Chris? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then that is that. You're welcome to hang out. Next item on our agenda is the minutes, which were sent to us by email. I don't know if everyone has a chance to read through them. Nothing jumped out to me needing change, but if there have any corrections to point them out. If not, a motion to approve minutes as I move to approve the minutes. All right. And second, you have a second from Justin.
I'll second.
All in favor of the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that is the minutes. So I'm ready to act on this. Request for horses. Do we want to talk about requests for 6? Do we feel more comfortable with 1, 3, 5?
Is there a way, because when I talk to all these people, I already hear number. Like, I totally put myself in your shoes and I tried my best for 6, you know, and it was really hard fought to get 2 from a lot of people. But in the interest of knowing that Josh appears to be an honorable person, is there some way to put this on like a trial basis, like be successful with 2? We can revisit this in like a year.
The nature of variances, they go as well. We grant whatever, it's there. I suppose in some weird scenario, if the lot gets chopped up and re-divided into other tax IDs, maybe the variance goes away. I don't know. But in general sense, it's there forever.
Okay.
Which is where, if, the business side of it, special use permits can have self-exploration, but then that's a whole different sort of things.
Okay.
But that's also not us tonight. Any more discussion, or we want to move on to information?
When you talk about a special use that would require for any type of usage of the property. So outside of personal use, anything for,
In
regardless.
essence, for business, yes. If he rents it out to someone whose property it is, if lives there with their 5 horses for the trainer who mentioned, you approve 5, that's all 7. If he rents it out as the interesting idea of a bed and breakfast for horses, that would require a special use permit, at least as I understand the code. And special use permit goes to the planning board, they look at other criteria. So for what it's worth, the property is called 2¼ acres. Code requires 3 for, I think it's up to 3 horses. Yep, up to 3. If you approve 6, that would be normally a 6-acre chunk of land. So he's just under halfway there, if that matters from how we approve this. If we approve 3, it's 2/3 of the way. I don't know if any of that makes any difference for anyone. So if anyone has anything else they'd like to mention, or we can start working on draft determination.
Josh, it's you. Oh, all right. So one of the cases that was before this board, like 6 years ago, 7, maybe 8 years ago, required, it was contingent upon somebody fencing the entirety of the property. And if you were to do that, you would end up with 2¼ acres of pasture, which in its entirety minus the house and the outbuildings is going to be 2. So it's 1/3 of the 6. I would say that, yeah, 3, I'm comfortable with 3. I think that land could support 3, and that person who comes in after you, that's going to be on that land when I'm 85 years old and still living on the other side of the park, is still only going to be allowed to have 3 horses, sort of thing. Because that's my fear in all this, is that it's just on that parcel, and that parcel is not going to support that forever. And I think even with 6, you're going to find out real quick, your neighbor to the north is going to be so happy looking down at the pastures.
Can I comment?
Absolutely.
So it really does seem like you've done a lot of homework. And I really do trust your judgment on everything you're saying. 6 may be too much. I was just trying to get as much flexibility as I can in that. I think what you're right is you're focusing on the parcel. You can't really count the 10 acres of pasture across the road or down the street, because that might not be there tomorrow, right? But I think there is a special circumstance that is going to be there forever, which is Mendon Ponds Park, 2,500 acres of trails and parks, and that's backing right up, with a trail into the park. That I think the person that I would want to live there is going to be utilizing that a lot of the year. So I also think I'm rebuilding it into a higher than normal end property in my mind.
Yeah.
So the people I'm going to try to fit in that house are going to be people that are good stewards of the land, they're probably going to know if 6 horses are too much without me even saying anything. But just another comment to pass along.
And just confirm it for the rest of the board, though, the fact that it is a rental does not, as presented, does not require to go to planning board. So,
Rental as residence. Right. With them, their personal.
Gotcha.
Because you could get the variance in turn on South Park.
Right.
Variance. Rental is
Just confirm.
That is your understanding as well?
Yeah, the business of renting is not itself a business. So
That's what I was trying.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I did hear 1, 3 sounds like a good idea. Does anyone else think that would be the way to go on this?
I have a better comfort level with 3 versus 6.
I would be willing to approve 6 based on the information that I have in the field across the street and then Ponds Park. I'm not going to vote against 3, but
Yeah. I think when the funds out back does make a difference. Again, it's not his land, and that in theory could change down the road.
Can't use the graze.
No. So I'm here, 2 would say 3 is fine, 1 would say 6 is fine, but isn't opposed to 3. Would thoughts change on 4? And again, assuming you're gonna say yes, because it's, yeah.
If for contingent on the entirety of the property being fenced. Just because that would give a responsible amount of acreage to the animals, I guess, on the property. And that's maybe not what we should be concerned with, is the humane aspect of the animals, but the reality is that's what prevents eyesores.
What's the benefit of the fencing?
But
I don't know.
okay, so the existing fencing pasture, you've got 17 posts deep, so that's 170 foot. So, you know, even if we were to draw that as a square, that's not even an acre, you know, and that's what's existing. You would have to go back behind the stone barn, pretty much across the entire back part of it, up to the backyard of the ranch, and then cut across to the driveway that runs to the barn. And then down back into the front pasture, and that would be about an acre and 3/4.
So the
I don't
benefit
think
of
you've been back
fencing-
there.
I just walked the driveway real quick.
Okay, we have a fence going all the way along the back perimeter and then the 2 sides, basically 3.
There was a lot of missing posts.
Oh, for sure, yeah, we're still fixing some of the fence, but, there's, the 3 lengths of the perimeter of the property has fence along it. And it's broken up into 2 different pastures. Behind that stone barn is actually a pasture right now, all the way along, and then it connects over to the other pasture, and there's just a little walkway in between to get to the park. We did that like, maybe the last 6 months or something, put that in and all. You can see it, you could walk back there, like, or go from the park, you can see it.
Yeah, next time I'm with the shepherds, I'll poke through on the other side.
Got it.
The benefit you will see to requiring fencing is making it clear this is for horses and not for people or whatever else.
Yeah. It's just, it's also a safety aspect too, because of the amount of traffic that's in the street and the unknown nature of any animal that's necessary, or it's a prey animal. You know, I could see a chipmunk and think the chipmunk's gonna kill it. You know, that's just the way that they act.
Chris, would that change your mind on 3 versus 4 versus whatever?
No, I agree with Dustin's. I think he's put a lot of time and effort and understand this better too, so.
So just to make sure I understood that right, you're okay with 4 if you require fencing versus 3 without?
I think 3, if you mend everything you got and you don't extend it in front of the house and box in the entirety of the property.
So I guess that this would go to you. 4 is more, but with the condition of you had to extend your fencing some. Is that an issue, or would you say 3 is an easier to live with case?
I would say if those were the only 2 choices, I'd probably say 3 would probably be better aesthetically for that location. I mean, I'd love to have more than 3, but
I understand.
yeah, if those are that was the option, I would probably go with 3.
Is everyone else generally okay with that?
I would just say again, that under the circumstances of this case where there's acres available to the applicant, even though they're on the other side of the road, I don't see it as a humane issue so much as it is a manure issue and a traffic management issue and a perhaps technical issue. So although the input was interesting and useful, that's not the perspective that I'm taking. I don't think there's a humane issue here. I think that horses on this property are going to be street. Even if there were 12, I don't think it would be a humane issue.
All right. You're thinking in light of the new management plan,
Yeah,
the additional other properties.
I know nothing about the management, so.
No, but
I-
did he produce?
I
the plan?
understand, yeah, I'm just saying that, yes, I was satisfied with the information that I saw.
And I agree. I thought it was well put together, thorough. You put thought and effort into that, so this was well done. Did have a question along Stephen's point about the additional acreage. Just to confirm that this current state of those fences on that side, is that usable?
The,
The 11 across the road.
Correct.
From our viewpoint for a variance, and by all means, somebody can tell me I'm wrong here, but because it's a separate tax ID, we can't condition because he could sell it tomorrow. He won't, of course, but he could, the future owners of whatever, so we can't condition on that in any shape or form. Otherwise, it'd be very easy because, well, this plus that is close enough.
yeah, Josh, is it fair to say that those fences need mending?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so with that, I'm happy to talk more if anyone has anything to say, but I think I'm hearing a consensus towards 3. And with that, we can work through the rest of the draft determination, filling in the numbers as needed. So that sounds good. Area variance requested by Josh. For lot consisting of 2.28 acres, RA2. It says 12 stall horse barn for 12 horses. I would say we're scratching out the 12 horses and putting in 3. Does that sound right for everyone?
Well, that's
So
his request, right? I mean,
Okay,
I'm
yeah,
not saying,
yeah, fair enough.
I would keep his request.
Request stays the same. You'll change that to low. Anyways, we're gonna approve based on, as we go down, does that sound right? Josh showed up tonight and on February 24th, requesting to house up to. So this is where I'm not sure. We could change 6 to 3.
But he's requesting that.
He is
Up to
requesting.
12, I think. I don't think he officially
No, yeah.
drew 12.
I would leave it as written because he did modify his request down to 6, which is what this reflects, and then you can just give the granting portion of this.
Where did he modify that?
We did get a message somewhere.
I mean, this letter still says we're requesting 12 horses. Right. I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
sure.
there's a letter from 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
5-3.
It should be right behind.
I didn't remember seeing the letter.
Yeah. I agree. I don't have it here, but I believe that.
We're all remembering seeing it. You acknowledged it, so. Yeah. So that would say applicant is requesting up to 6 horses, section 260.8N1A of the code says 6 acres per meter for 6 horses. Does not currently house horses, but it has in years past. 268.1 of the code is storage of manure within distance of 200 feet of lot line. Not requested a variance to that, but has submitted a manure management plan, which covers the request for managing the requested 6 horses.
Can we move that restriction?
Can we remove the manure?
Like if we approve it, like just so it's not an issue because he has done his work.
So my intent to point both points out is point out that the code does say that other bit, about 200 feet, but that he has a manure management plan. So we've at least acknowledged it's there. In my mind, it's a non-issue. I talked to Corey Code Enforcement, says it's also a non-issue. If it did come, that would be separate variance down the road potentially. Because that was not what was requested. 11-acre parcel directly across the street, also owned. Configured for horses, intended to continue usage. Pointing out that 265, 261 The amended zoning code requires special use to run a stable or riding academy, and special use permits are handled by the planning board. It's not in here, but I think we should add, whereas Mendon Ponds Park is connected to the rear of the property, just to point out that it is adjacent. Does anyone else think there's anything that should be included in this section?
I would suggest that in the section that you just read about special permit to run a stable, and all that he's been informed of such, I would add the whereas in there that Mr. Colley has advised that he intends to not operate a commercial stable. Use it for residential.
So as a separate, whereas.
Yeah, just to make it clear that he's, even though that's what he originally proposed, he's not intending to pursue that. And that if he did, he would have to still get funded for it.
So suggested verbiage for that?
Yeah. Just Then he change, then he decides to pursue commercial uses for the property, he would have to obtain any required approvals from the planning.
So whereas Mr. Colley intends to use the property for residential, not commercial purposes. Does that sound adequate or? Yeah. not? So anything else, anything should be added to this at this stage? All right,
We still need to close the public hearing.
I would say until this is moved formally, it doesn't matter.
You can come back to it at any time, but you will need to. It's a quote unquote table.
So barring surprises, no one commented for that bit. For the next bit, we do have dated 2/24 comments from the county. So that will go in there. Which brings us to the 5 questions. And is this where we would put in that we're granting 3 horses? That was a
Yes.
mistake. So essentially as a number 0, we're granting 3 horses, or as somewhere else?
I would say that I would add that I would add the whereas before the 5 factors, indicating whereas after review, the zoning board appeals has determined that a variance of no more than variance allowing for no more than 3 horses would be acceptable for this property.
In case he pursues something where it's limited usage, could we say permanent horses? Like that sort of idea that they're there all year.
You could add that. I'm not sure.
Just in case you do get weekend traffic.
Okay, that provides flexibility.
And then we can, once you go through the 5 factors, then we add additional clarification, which would now therefore be resolved portion. That also, that section is really the operative section of your resolution, and that's what we'll also add. This whereas stuff is preliminary.
So I'm seeing after the county planning board mentioned, or before the next one, adding another, whereas after review, the zoning board of appeals has weighed the facts and determined 3 permanent horses is appropriate. Does that seem good, or should I worsen it? That's more. All right,
No more than 3 horses.
so more than. All right. So onto our five factors. I would say cannot be achieved by other reasonable means. See any objections to that? I would say it is substantial, as it's less than half the required, no, wait, we're giving 3. Does that make a difference? Anyone's mind?
Because for three, it's 3 acres.
Yeah.
So it's
So it's-
2/3.
It's still
Yeah.
substantial, but the less than half verbiage goes away.
Correct.
So it is substantial. Has additional acres on adjoining properties does not mitigate the issues. So basically just crossing out.
Does not mitigate the issues. Technically.
Well, but then the request could be achieved by other means.
Not legally.
But it could.
Not by other people. I wouldn't make somebody build a barn on it. It's probably-
No, but I might suggest combining the parcels.
Right.
Which is again outside of the scope of this board. As much as we might like to do that, that's not how
Just-
we have. So does that sound okay? The request is substantial as additional acreage on adjoining properties. Does not mitigate the issue. Sure. All right. 3 as we show up. 3 was weird because I was not sure if we had a short environment assessment form. I'm not seeing it in the paperwork, but I think we talked about enough that we can say the request will not have any adverse physical or environmental effects. We have a management plan, so I think that's covered there. So the other non-numbered bits before we get to 4, let's get crossed
I
out.
think, Justin, you made a comment about removing the management plan component, correct?
Yeah, the 260-81.
So do you want to cross that whereas out up here,
Yeah, I
not
don't,
even mention that it exists?
I think that his plan is totally encompassing of that, yeah. It surpasses what we want as a town. I mean, we really do let people just wheel it into a roll-off dumpster and then call somebody to go pick it up. You know,
Everyone else okay going back up and crossing out that whereas? All right,
That's fine with me. I think it's always just saying 3 because
right.
Okay, that was gonna be the second part of it.
So number 3, as written right there on page 1, stays. No environmental, physical environmental impacts as the applicant's manure management plan. The non-numbered bits on the top of page 2, before we get to 4, all of that goes away.
Mhm.
Because that was uncertain of what all was going on, and therefore I was tossing ideas out. 4, I put out 2 ideas for whether it would or wouldn't have undesirable change to the neighborhood. I would say it will not.
you better buy that neighbor to the north. Nice bottles of wine, like every 2-3 months. Oh, man. It's gonna be brutal. in
Does
February.
it's not because Fortis has previously been housed there, does that seem reasonable?
Mhm.
All right. And it was self-created, it's the desire of Horses Driving Northwest. Type 2 action under seeker. We'll prove it. Is this where we put in 3 horses?
Yeah, so I would suggest that this section, this next paragraph read, now therefore be resolved that the application is granted to the extent that the applicant is permitted no more than 3 horses on the property.
Do you have verbiage written down there?
I don't have it written down. I just came up with it.
it's on YouTube. You'll be able to look up later.
For the reasons stated above, et cetera, et cetera.
So we're essentially sticking in, application be granted, gets extra words stuck in there saying no more than 3. And then I see no need for conditions that italicized note with just that note point out why we can't condition on the neighboring land. So with all of that, unless anyone sees anything else we should modify or stick in, we go back to the public hearing.
I'm going to close public hearing.
Chris?
Thank you.
All right, all in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
All right. And none opposed? With that, Anyone like to move this draft we have before us?
I'll move it.
Second by Chris. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, you have approval for 3 horses.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Josh.
With that, next item on the agenda is, if we have nothing for next potential meeting?
You have another application coming today, but I still need to scan it in at the 11th hour. So if you're meeting on, so June 9th is canceled, June 23rd is going to be the Powell area grants that you have in front of you, and the will not. That's gonna be like about 35.
So nothing for the 9th, 2 things for the
You'll have
23rd.
2 on the next one.
All right. Slightly different topic. I've been writing a draft determination, so I'm gonna keep doing that, but just so I am not a single point of failure, if anyone would like to write up one for either the 2 cases for the 23rd, by all means, you can do so. But just thought I'd toss that out there.
I did one a few years ago.
You did, but I don't think anyone else has. I just, single points of failure on that. I should be able to drop dead, the board should continue. I don't plan on it, but, no.
Right.
With that, unless anyone has anything else that we should discuss before adjourning? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. And that's me. All in favor?
Aye.